Shalom Aleichem, and welcome back, everyone, as we are preparing for Shabbat, Parashat Tetzaveh. It's famously known that Parashat Tetzaveh really deals with the making of the clothing for the Kohanim. So we know we're right before Purim, right? So we'll see how we can tie in this week's Parsha to Purim as well. Starting off, we're going to bring from the Ben Ish Chai, Rav Yosef Chaim in Baghdad. He says an amazing idea on this week's Parasha. On this week's Parasha, we have a pasuk. The pasuk reads as follows: "V'heshev afudato asher alav k'ma'aseu mimenu yiyeh." Right, the cheshev, the belt, which is going to be put onto the ephod, which is on it. It should be like its work of it shall be. Meaning k'ma'aseu mimenu yiyeh. It shall be on the same workmanship. It should be made of it. Okay, so you have the ephod, and the pasuk says you make the belt, and the belt has to be made from the same way you make the ephod itself. This is one of the garments the Kohen Gadol will wear. So the cheshev, the belt, would have to also be made of the same material. Says the Ben Ish Chai, Rav Yosef Chaim in Baghdad, Zecher Tzadik Lebracham. He says, what does it mean? What is a beged? A beged, he says, could be compared to children. Someone's child. He says, we have a pasuk in Navi Zechariah, right? There's Yeshua Kohen Gadol. And Hashem tells him, take off your clothing. It's dirty. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin asks, what, Yeshua Kohen Gadol walks around with dirty clothing? So the Gemara says, no, it means his two children who married Goyim, that he had to make them either, separate from them. So you see children, when it says remove your dirty garments, is referred to children. So comes the Ben Ish Chai and says, in this week's pasuk, where it says the belt should be made from the same material and the same way that the ephod is made, cheshev ha'ephod, belt of the ephod, should be made, kima aseu mimenu yeh, should be made the same way. He says this is the idea of chinuch, of how to train children. He says, you cannot train children to be quiet in shul if the parents are talking in shul. You can't train the children to learn Torah if the parents aren't learning Torah. He says it all comes together. And the belt, the child, which is compared to the belt, is the garment of the parent. Here he says a very nice lashon over here. He says, we can often see who the parent is by looking at the children. Because the children learn exactly from their parents.
What's the pasuk from the Navi?
This is a pasuk in Zechariah, Perek Gimel, pasuk 4, where he says, Hasiru habegadim hatzoim me'elav. Take off the dirty clothing that's off you. So that,
Beged is a fault.
right, but it's a beged. It's the lashon of talking about a garment. A garment can mean children, and here it says when you have children, you want to teach them, you got to wrap them up. This is the way the Ben Ish Chai explains it. It says here in the Prinim al Torah. He says a beautiful story. It's actually a scary story, but happened with the student of the Hafetz Chaim, Harav Plitnik. Rav Plitnik was a Rav in Liverpool, England, and he was a Rav. He was known to be the student of Hafetz Chaim. But he had a lot of difficulty with his community. He had a problem with his community. The community, there was a president in the community, the Rosh HaKahal, the head of the community, and he gave the Rav a run for his money. He always gave trouble to the Rav. And for years, Rav Plitnik, who was a student of the Chavetz Chaim, was trying his best to lead the community. And this Rosh HaKahal, this individual this president made an issue for him one after the other. After a few years, the Rosh HaKahal comes one day to the Rav's house in the middle of the night. And he says to the Rav, he says to Rav Plitnik, he says, you have to help me. He says, what happened? He says, I just found out that my daughter is going to marry a guy. And I can't believe it. I need you as the Rav to talk to her. I need you as the Rav to talk her out of it. Now, this is a man who's been made Rav Plitnik's life very difficult for the many, many years, or for over 30 years. And Rav Plitnik says, okay, as my job as a Rav, I will talk to her and I will do my best. And he calls her and make an appointment, and he meets with her, and he speaks for her for over an hour, and nothing doing. This girl says, Rabbi, you're wasting your time, you're wasting your breath. I am getting married to this guy, and the wedding is next week. No one is stopping me. And so it was. She got married to the guy. And now this man comes to the Rav and says, Rav, you didn't help me. You didn't help me. You were supposed to help me. How could you do this to me? How could you let my wife? How can you let my daughter marry a guy? How could you do this to me? He complains to the Rav. So Rav Plitnik says, listen, after listening to this guy screaming and yelling at him, he says, let me tell you a little story. There was once a young guy, a young doctor, who worked very hard to come up with a cure for an illness that killed children. And he worked very hard, and he finally created this cure. And he created this cure, and not only he created it, he decided he'll go from city to city, and he'll give it out for free. And he went ahead, and this is what he was doing. From city to city, he was traveling. And people came to him, and people knew about it, and he would cure many, many, many children. And one day, as he's traveling between one city to the next, a group of bandits, thieves, robbers, stop him. And they steal everything that's on him, including the medicine. And they beat him up, and they just left him with an inch of his life. He survives, and he makes it to the next city. He recuperates, and a few days later, everyone finds out that this doctor is there. And he sees a huge line coming to where he's staying, and in front of the line was the head of all the bandits. And he's there, and he says, you have to help me, you have to cure my child. My child, they said you have the medicine. And this doctor says to this man, to this bandit, to this thief, he says to him, I wish I could have helped you, but you and your friends beat me up a few days ago, and you took everything from me, including that medicine, and now I have nothing left. Says Rav Plitnik to this man. He says, yes, it's the Rav's job to keep everybody to follow the Torah and to help them out and to go where there's problems, but if you went home every single day and you bashed the Rav to your family, you didn't like me, and you caused a lot of problems, and you said all these different things to your daughter, then obviously when I came to speak to your daughter, I was of no help. How could I be of any help when she learned from you that the Rav was a nobody, when the Rav was nothing? So obviously I had no chance to help. It says here, the Pnim al Torah of Sheinbaum, it's so important that our children, that they hear the right message. That they not just hear the right message, they see the right message. Because they are us. What the children are doing, he says here, we often see who the parents really are by looking at their children. So this is an important. This is not necessarily 100. This is not 100% in all cases.
Let's say you have two kids going
but it is in many cases somewhat indicative of what's going on. This is from the Ben Ish Chai. This is Pnim al Torah. Let's move on to another lesson on this week's Parsha. Okay, so we have all the clothing that's going on over here that that is being worn. One of the garments was the me'il. The me'il was a long blue woolen robe, and at the bottom of this robe were several dozen bells. And the Torah says, why were there bells there? Okay, so let's read the pasuk. The pasuk says, of Aharon l'sharet, right? It should be on Aaron when he's walking around in the Beit HaMikdash. V'nishma kolo b'va'oel hakodesh lefnei Hashem v'tzeitov lo yamut. So it will make known that he's coming in and he's coming out, and this way he won't die. So if he doesn't wear the me'il with the robes on, and he does the service, he dies. And if he wears it, he's not going to die. And it's in order for everyone to hear. In order to, it should be heard when he's walking in to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Says, we have to think about it for a second. What is the lesson that we're learning from here? There's a Midrash Rabbah in Vayikra. And the Midrash says a very interesting story. There was a Rabbi Chanina, ben Chinai and Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. They went to learn Torah from Rabbi Akiva in Bnei Brak. And they were there for 13 years. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai always sent messengers back and forth to his home to see what's happening. But Rabbi Chanina, he didn't. And one day, Rabbi Chanina's wife sends him a message saying, we have to marry off our daughter. It's time to get her married. You got to come back. And he ignored the message. Somehow Rabbi Akiva heard about the message, either through Ruach HaKodesh or wherever. And he said, anyone who has a daughter to get married should go home and take care of it. So Rabbi Hanina realizes that Rabbi Akiva is talking to him. He gets up and he goes home. He goes back to his town, he goes back to his house, and he sees that his house is not his house. His family's not living in there. So he doesn't know where they are. He says, I'll stay by the well, and I'll see when people come, and he hears that someone is talking to a girl and says, the daughter of Hanina, fill up your jug and go home. So he follows his daughter home, and she walks inside, and he walks in right after her. Right? And his wife looks at him, the wife looks at him, and in shock, all of a sudden her husband is home, she dies. Okay? So he now says to Hashem, listen, is this her schar? She sent me to go learn for 13 years, and now she sees me, she dies. And Hashem returned her neshama to her body. That's a story in the Midrash. Says Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, there are 4 things that Hashem hates, and we hate them too. I'm not going to go through all 4 things, but one thing that he says is this idea. V'hanichnas liveito pit'om, to walk into your house all of a sudden. Hashem hates. That's what he says. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says that Hashem hates when someone walks into a house unannounced. And this is talking about your own house. How much more so in your friend's house? You can't just pop in. That's why, then the Me'il, there was those bells. You can't just pop in. You got to make a sound. You got to make a noise. It says over here, when Rabbi Yochanan would go up to meet Rabbi Hanina, he would emit a sound. He would make sounds in order to make his presence known. Rabbi Akiva, talking to his son Rabbi Yeshua in Mesechet Psachim and Daf Kuf Yud Bet on 112. Rabbi Akiva teaches his child 7 things. And one of the 7 things is, do not enter a house before knocking. I'm talking about your own house. And of course, so much so your friend's house. There's an etiquette here. You have to be doing it the right way. A person can't just walk in and do whatever he wants. He has to make it known that he's there. But there's another part of this, Rabotai. The Me'il, the robe with all the bells on it. Where is Aaron going with it? Where is Aaron, Kohen Gadol? Where is he going with it? He's going to Hashem. He's going to Hashem's house. He's going to Hashem's Ol Moed. He's going where Hashem speaks to him. Really? Hashem needs noise? Hashem doesn't know Aaron's coming? Hashem, who's omnipresent and knows everything everywhere all at the same time, he needs bells to tell him that someone's coming? Okay, for people, teach us this lesson somewhere else. Why are you teaching us this lesson here? From the Me'il. Hashem doesn't need bells. Okay, good. You're saying good. The reminder is not for Hashem. The reminder is that Aaron should always have etiquette. Very good. But we're going to leave another answer as well. The Mefarshim explained that sometimes what happens is when a person is doing something holy and something good, they think that they can trample upon everyone else's kavod, that etiquette is no longer important, that derech eretz is no longer needed because I'm doing something holy. Says the Mefarshim. That's why we want to put the noise on the Me'il. Even when Aaron is going to the Kodesh Kodashim, the highest thing. And you're right, Hashem doesn't need it. However, etiquette, derech eretz, still needs to be in place. Here they say a story that there was a group of students who wanted to go to a certain rabbi's yeshiva. So they went there, they went for an interview, and they spent a day or 2 in the yeshiva, hoping to get admitted to the yeshiva. And after spending about 2 days there, the chacham, the sage, said, I accept everybody here except for one guy. And he pointed to the young man who's not going to be accepted in the yeshiva. And this young boy started to cry. He said, I don't understand. I'm just like them. I also have a good head. I also want to learn. And the Chacham said, when you washed your hands before coming to my table to eat with me, you couldn't find a towel. So you wiped your hands on a coat that belonged to one of your friends. Being in a hurry to hear words of wisdom does not exempt you from derech eretz. If you were true Talmid Chacham, you would never have done such a thing. And as such, you are not accepted into my yeshiva. That's the idea, Rabotai. The idea is that no matter what you're doing in life, etiquette, derech eretz, is never thrown to the wayside. It has to be done correctly. There was once a young widow who entered Reb Shlomo Zalman's study, and she was very, very, upset and very much stressed out. And she said she's very lonely, but she wants to do something for her children. She wanted to do something for her husband who passed away. She says, maybe I should make a gemach, a free loan fund, or should I donate books to the yeshiva for my husband? What should I do? I want to do something in the zachut for my husband. I want to feel like I'm doing something for my deceased husband. So what did Rabbi Shlomo Zalman tell her? He said, this is what you're going to do. You're going to take that money that you want to buy books and donate and do things, and you're going to go and buy some toys for your children. And you're going to go and take your children on a trip. And you're going to take them to the park. This is the tikkun for your husband. This is the tikkun. The Kohen's thoughts, even though he's going into the Kodesh Kodashim, he has to remember derech eretz. You have to remember what's here. You have to remember what's doing right now. The children need to be taken care of. Yes, the father needs a zachut, but through his children growing and becoming wholesome and becoming good Jews, that will be the biggest chut for him. Yeah, we have to think what we're doing. Sometimes we think this is a holy endeavor and that's it. I'm just going to do it. The idea here is it's not that way. You have to think into it. Let's move on to our third lesson from this week's Parashat. So we'll start off talking a little bit about Adar. In Mishlei it says, Simcha le'ish, happiness to a person, b'ma'ana piv, when he afflicts his mouth. Says the Noam Elimelech, an ish tzaddik, how does he become a tzaddik? He has to watch his mouth by not talking. Says here Rabbi Biderman, you should know that when a person keeps quiet, this is a segula for happiness. He says, I'll prove it to you. Every chodesh, right, every month has a certain zodiac sign. What is the zodiac sign of Adar? Fish. Right? You see a lot of time Adar have fish. Right? He says, what's fish? He says horses make neighing sounds. Right? All different animals make all sorts of sounds. Donkeys bray, horses neigh, lions roar. Right? Cows moo. He says, what about fish? Fish don't make any sounds. Fish are in the water. They don't make any sounds. Fish can't talk. Fish don't make sounds. He says that's why Chodesh Adar, which is the month of Simcha, Mishenichas Adar Marbim Simcha, has what? Has fish. Because you're supposed to be quiet like fish. It saves people from machloket. It saves people from all sorts of problems. You know, the Gemara says in Masechet Megillah, Leka di'adar lishanab bishan kehaman. There was nobody who knew how to say Lashon Hara like Haman. Right? Haman, he said, listen, Achashverosh, there's one nation, they're spread out, right? They don't eat your food, they don't keep our holidays, you know how to make the sound very bad, like the New York Times, right? You had to make the Jews look bad. He used his mouth to try to destroy the Jewish people. How did we survive? How do we become successful and survive Haman's Gezerah? Very simple. By not talking, right? Lo hagida Esther et amo Moldata, she didn't say which nation, where she was born, because Mordechai said, Ki Mordechai tziva aleya, asher lo tagid. She didn't talk. That's how she survived. That's how the whole miracle happened, because she didn't talk. And a lot of times people just want to talk. But the idea is, Adar is a month of keeping quiet. It's being a fish. Keeping your mouth shut. It saves you. It keeps you from mahloket. How do we see it in this week's parasha? We see it from the Me'il. Right? How do you see it in the Me'il? We know the Gemara in Zvachim says, right after the clothing that's brought down that we're making this week, it starts talking about korbanot. What's the connection? So the Gemara in Zvachim says, just like korbanot bring kapara, bring atonement, so does the clothing of the Kohanim bring atonement. So says the Gemara, the Me'il brings atonement for what? For which Avirah? Lashon Hara. Just like Lashon Hara is chatter, so too the Me'il that makes the noises makes a kapara for Lashon Hara. Says the Alshich. In Pasuk it says, Pa'amon zahav verimon. You have a pomegranate, and then you have a bell, and then another pomegranate, and then a bell, and a pomegranate, and a bell. That's the way it was in the Me'il. One pomegranate, one bell. One pomegranate, one bell. What? It looked like out of material. And a bell next to it. But then the Pasuk says, Upa'amonei zahav betocham. The golden bells were between the pomegranates. Right. If you have a bell, pomegranate, you can say either the bell is between two pomegranates, or you can say the pomegranate is between two bells. But the Torah says the bell was between two pomegranates. Says the Ashlich. Why? What does the Ashlich say? The Ashlich says the pomegranates, they are like the mouth, and the bell is the tongue that talks. So what are you supposed to do? The Ashlich says twice be quiet as much as you talk. So if you talk one word, you should be quiet for two. If you talk 1 minute, you should be quiet for two. That's what the Alshich says. Why? Because that's the way you're going to stop saying Lashon Hara. Less you speak, the less Lashon Hara, the more kapara you're going to have. That's what the Alshich says. And we have the Gemara that talks like this. The Gemara Megillah on Daf Yud Chet says, Mila Basela, a good word is worth 1 coin, but mashtuka betrein. But keeping quiet is worth 2 coins. Right? It's always better to keep quiet than to talk. But Rabotai, it's a very interesting lashon. The Gemara says mashtuka, from being quiet. It doesn't say shtika. Quiet is worth 2 coins. It says mashtuka. So says the Baba Rebbe. He says, you know what this means? When it says mashtuka is worth 2 coins, it's not shtika. It's not being quiet. But rather it means talking after being quiet. What does that mean? To think what you're about to say. Well, I remember having a 6th grade teacher, Mr. Contersi. He was a guy, but he was a very smart man. And he once said, before you talk, think what you're saying. Do you need to say it? Would your parents be proud that you said it? And it's important to say. And if it checks off all 3, then say it. That's what the Bava Rebbe here is saying. He's saying that speaking a good word is worth 1 coin. But speaking after stopping and thinking, that's worth even more. And not only you speak, you stop thinking, you quiet before you talk, but you quiet after you talk to think, what did I just say? Did it make sense? Did it hit the right way? Do I have to say it again a different way? A refined waxman, Shlita, shares a story that happened with him when he was a child. He says one day after yeshiva, all the boys went on the city bus, and they started talking. One thing led to another, and they started talking about a certain rich man in the community. how he wasn't so careful like this, and he wasn't so careful with the mitzvot, and he didn't pray, and this and that. And in the end, they see that this man's son is sitting in the front of the bus, and he heard everything. And he was all red in the face, embarrassed, and said, I can't believe you guys, I'm not mochel you, and he ran off the bus. The fine waxman says, now imagine one of the boys runs off the bus and walks over to him, and this guy, the son who's all, embarrassed, says, leave me alone. He says, no, I need to ask you something. He says, no, I'm not mochel you, I don't care. He says, no, I need to ask you something. So he says, no, what do you want from me? Stop already. He said, I just want to ask you, I know your father owns a factory. Can I get a summer job by your father? I need to make some money. What would this rich boy say? What would he say? You just made fun of my father for the past hour, and now you expect me to get you a job? Says Rabbi Waxman. Right? Says Rabbi Waxman. This is the same thing that happens with us every single day. We speak Lashon Hara. We're hurting HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak. We're hurting Hashem. Hashem says, don't speak Lashon Hara. Then people complain about God. People complain about Hashem's children. And then they come to Tefillah and they say, Hashem, give me this, give me that, give me this, give me that. How? So that's why the Pasuk says what? You have to walk with the Me'il into the Kadosh. Why? The Me'il represents keep your mouth shut. Talk only good stuff. Don't talk nonsense. Think before you talk. Because if you want Hashem to hear you, then you have to know how to talk. V'nishma kolo. Then your voice will be heard. If you keep quiet when you're supposed to, and you talk when you're supposed to. Rabotai, I want to end off with one last idea. Now we just said that quietness is important. It brings you simcha. It brings you kapara. Talking when important is worth even more. And this is the idea, Rabotai. The Me'il was a kapara because it made noise. That's what the Gemara said. The Gemara should have said something that's quiet should bring kapara. Why did the Gemara say something that's noise makes you kapara for Lashon Hara? You know why? Because you do have to speak. But you have to speak right. The Zohar HaKadosh says that if you have a chance to say something good and you don't say it, you also get punished. That means you have to speak. But you have to speak right. Sometimes we don't know how powerful our words are. One day, Rav Broka was in the marketplace together with Eliyahu Hanavi. And he asked Eliyahu Hanavi, who here has Olam Haba? And Eliyahu Hanavi says, you see those two people? They have Olam Haba. So Rav Broka went to these two people and said, what do you guys do? And they said, what? We're comedians. We make people laugh. We're jesters. We're jokers. When we see someone down, we bring up their spirits. And they were Zochet Olam Haba. Because when you have words, you have to speak them the right way. The Midrash Vayikra tells us Rav Shimon ben Gamliel once said to his slave Tevi, go to the marketplace and buy me the best piece of meat. What did Tevi do? Tevi came back with Zon, right? He came back with a tongue. So the next day, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel said to him, go to the marketplace and get me the worst piece of meat. And what did Tevi do? And again, he brought back the tongue. And Rav Shimon said, how could it be? One tongue is bad, one tongue is good. It's the same tongue. What are you doing? And Tevi replied, good and bad come from the tongue. When the tongue is used for good things, there's nothing better. And when the tongue is used for bad things, there's nothing worse than it. So I took quickly review the 3 lessons that we learned from this week's Parashat. We learned about the garments and the belt of the garment. And the Ben Ish Chai said that the belt represents the children. And the children are connected to us. And a lot of times our children show us who we are. And what do we have to do? We have to teach them by showing them. The second lesson was that we have to knock before entering. We have to have respect for etiquette. And just because you're doing something holy doesn't mean derech eretz flies out the window. And the third lesson was keeping quiet could bring you simcha, but talking appropriately could bring you closer to Hashem and bring you even to a greater point of simcha when you use your words correctly. And with this, I want to wish everybody Shabbat Shalom and Purim Sameach.